E. Hello gamers, it's me, Scuba. I've played a lot of games in my life. Some are just fun to play, some are fun to speedrun, some are just fun to sit down and be creative, and some can bring life-changing experiences. My point here is that there are good games, bad games, disappointing games that really should have more in them considering their budget, who made them, and considering the fact that it's the largest multimedia franchise on the planet. Great games, fun games, and there are those few games that stand out. Those few gems that sparkle and shine brilliantly, just waiting for you to find them. And this is the #1 rule of the internet, so I have to say this to preface this video, otherwise I'm going to get canceled on twitter.com. 1. Just because I think a game is great does not mean that everyone will think a game is great. People have different tastes and they can enjoy different things. That's part of life. 2, I shouldn't even need to say this, but we're on the internet, so, this is my opinion, okay? I know it's pretty dangerous to, have an opinion in today's day and age. If you have an opinion, you are going to die. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the FBI did another raid of my house looking for illegal opinions, but this is my opinion, so don't feel obliged to have the same views as me. So I was in Best Buy a while ago and I was getting some games, as I usually do, some of which I may stream in the future at twitch.tv/ScubaShark8857. And I happened to see this game, Wise Origins, or actually pronounced Ease. I don't know it either, but I'm just going to refer to it as Wise because I feel like newcomers to the series wouldn't necessarily register it. Like, people who would be, blind to the series wouldn't necessarily register that as Ease. They'd see it as Wise. So I feel like, if you were going to suggest the game to someone and you said Ease, they'd go into GameStop, they wouldn't even be able to figure out what the hell is going on. So I'd heard great things about this franchise, hearing the usual, like, oh, this is the greatest franchise of all time, and all that whatnot. On top of that, earlier that same day, I was in the Xenoblade Discord, and someone was telling me that, Wise is really good, and that I would love it, and that I'd really like it if I enjoyed Xenoblade, which, if you don't know, I really like Xenoblade. I love Xenoblade. Xenoblade is, like, my favorite game of all time. The last time I got a recommendation with this context was when I ended up playing Dragon Quest XI, which I actually had a really fun time with. It was a fun game, and I really enjoyed it. So when I saw Wise Origins at Best Buy, on the Nintendo Switch, no less, also with my dad's credit card, I said, I gotta get this. So I got the game, strolled out of Best Buy, and started playing it. Now, I know this is a weird thing to say, but I was actually kind of disappointed when I started playing it. You see, the Wise series is actually a JRPG series, Japanese role-playing games for those who aren't familiar with the term. And I expected Origins to be a massive open-world adventure with crazy characters and insane 60-hour minimum plot that would get flipped on its head in the last 10 hours of the game, and a soundtrack that would make my mind just melt with pleasure. In reality, what I got was more of a dungeon-crawling hack-and-slash style game. You see, the Wise franchise has 9 main games, the most recent actually being Wise 9, Monster Knox, which was actually localized in the US like February 2nd or something. However, Wise Origins is actually a prequel to the first 2 Wise games. I say the first 2 because they were actually part of the same game and continuing the same story, but they couldn't be released together because of its hardware limitations, and the game was released in 1989. That being said, don't feel obligated to play all the games before you play another one. Like, it's kind of like Dragon Quest, where, like, you can play one of the games, you can play 11 and have not played, like, any other games in the series, and it's basically its own standalone story kind of thing, and it works, and it's great. Because otherwise it would make no sense to have, like, a series go on for 9 games where you have to play every single game in a row. It's just not profitable. It doesn't make any sense at all. However, even though I was disappointed at first, I actually found the game to be really fun, and probably one of my favorite games that I played in the last year or so. So the question is, why? So I've never really made a review video before. I actually tried once with my friend ConnectSnayer41, you may know him, I stream with him a lot, but I never finished it, so forgive me if this is structured poorly. With that being said, I want to go over individual aspects of the game itself and rank those attributes before going over a final score. So now that I've spent the last 3 minutes and 44 seconds getting useless expedition, let's dive in, baby! So I want to start with the story. While I originally expected a lot out of the game's story, my expectations kind of shifted once I learned it was a spin-off, especially learning that it was more of a hack-and-slash style gameplay, which I'll get into in a minute. But I really didn't expect much out of the game's story. However, I was pleasantly surprised with how just in-depth and how much of a presence the story actually has in the game as a whole. That may sound like a turnoff for, like, a dungeon-crawling hack-and-slash style game, but it actually works, and it's not, like, too intrusive. They have, like, an auto-skip button that you can press if you don't want to focus on that. But I was pleasantly surprised with just how, in-depth the story was and how good it was. So the game actually features not 1, but 3 different stories, which are actually based on the character path you take. You start the game with 2 options, Unica and Hugo. Once you beat both of their paths, you actually unlock a secret 3rd path, which I'm not going to spoil, but I can say that one probably has the best story. So it's kind of like Fire Emblem Fates, but with an actually good story and without the ridiculous paywall. So when the game starts up, some woman starts speaking to you in French or something. So basically there's this cool city called called Ys. It was really powerful and prosperous. On top of that, there were also two goddesses, Rhea and Fina, who helped the city prosper with the help of an artifact known as the Black Pearl, which could grant basically any wish and allow the people of the world to use magic. However, one day, a bunch of demons came out of nowhere and attacked the city of Ys. The goddesses, along with the 6 priests of Ys, used their power to raise the city of Ys, also known as Solomon's Shrine, into the sky. So the demons, having big brains, built a giant tower to try and reach the city of Ys. So after a while, the two goddesses, Rhea and Fina, are found missing from their temple. So you and a group of other people from Ys go down to the surface and try to rescue the goddesses. On the way down, Sephiroth shoots you with an intercontinental ballistic missile and you get separated from your group. You find that the earth is covered in noxious fumes because the demons have been using way too much of that Mary Jane, and find a magic tree. The tree says, yeah, the goddesses are in the tower, so you rush to the tower and try and save them. This sounds really complicated, but I can assure you that the game does a great job explaining it in the opening cutscene. So this is basically the start of the story for the first two paths. The third path has like a slightly different start, but it's not really that much different, and it's also spoiler, so I don't really want to talk about that, because I don't feel like giving out spoilers for a game that originally released in 2006. So something that I think a lot of people would think right off the bat when looking at this game is that the two stories for the male and female characters are basically just copy pastes of each other, just like playing as the male or female trainer in Pokemon. However, I was pleasantly surprised to find that each path featured not only a completely unique story, but like completely unique gameplay, interactions, events. Each path is almost entirely unique from the others, with different styles of gameplay. Yes, you go up the same tower and same maps, but at the same time, the gameplay style is very different, and the way the levels are designed really helps to make it feel like a completely different experience, which I'll get into later, but it does a really good job of that. Now, each path does share the same goal of reaching the top of the tower and killing any demons you find along the way, but to say that both paths are the same is just a lie. Now, Unica, the female, her path is a story of building confidence, a story of dealing with loss, of revenge, and the story of an underdog. It's really interesting. And Hugo's path, the male character, also deals with self-worth, but focuses on family, fate, free will, power, and identity. And don't even get me started on the final path, because it is absolutely insane. I once again don't want to spoil it, but it definitely made playing through both the other paths more worth it than it already was. It was just an incredible thing to experience and complete. I would highly recommend it if you get this game, just doing all 3 paths. It is totally worth it. I know I didn't go into much depth on the stories, but each of them was unique and just a joy to play through. Overall, playing the base game with all 3 stories got me around 21 hours of playtime, and I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend this game to someone who enjoys a good story, and I would give the story itself a solid 8 out of 10. Now, the story's pretty good, but how's the gameplay? Because gameplay can really make or break a game. As Reggie once said,
if it's not fun, why bother?
Well, I wouldn't call the gameplay the best in the world by any means. I would say that it's actually really good. So I kind of said before that in addition to each character having their own unique storyline, each character has their own, different style of gameplay, a completely different moveset, each with varying weapon classes, attack speeds, attack ranges, and also unique skills. For example, Unica is a brawler wielding an axe. She has medium attack speed and medium attack range. Her specials mostly focus on dealing splash damage, with the exception of her fire special, which slows down her attack speed a bit, but gives her a lot more range. Meanwhile, Hugo is a mage using slow magic attacks that have long range. I say slow because, well, I mean, just look at the gameplay. That's not slow, in my opinion. He also has these weird things called the Eyes of Fact, which basically allow him to shoot multiple projectiles, all the time. Hugo's specials are also completely different, his one special being a shield, which I found incredibly useful in some of the final areas of the game. His lightning special uses one of the Eyes of Fact as a bomb that you can leave behind you at the cost of being able to shoot one less projectile per input, until the bomb detonates, which is only a few seconds. His fire special turns the Eyes of Fact into 2 spinning balls of death that circle the player for a short time, doing damage to anything that touches them. In addition, if you charge a special, you can also shoot death lasers. This once again comes at the cost of your extra projectiles while using the special, but each one has its own uses. The third character is a high-speed, close-range berserker who can either shred up enemies or get shredded by enemies, and I know from experience. His specials also have very limited range, with his wind special basically being a Dragon Ball Z teleport, his lightning special being practically useless due to the high charge time and low damage output that it gives. It basically just shoots a little electric ball right in front of him, and then that stays there for a solid second and does a bit of damage. And his fire special, easily being the best, maintaining low range but having solid area of effect damage, as well as complete damage immunity for the duration of the attack. This one is definitely the path that requires the most skill. With that being said, you should probably have a good enough understanding of how to play the game by the time you get to this point to be able to really play it and push through with it. Now, in that explanation, I also talked about specials. So what are they? Well, throughout the tower, you will find artifacts from Ys. These artifacts give you special abilities when you first obtain them, allowing you to use special attacks, or at least that's what I call them. These special abilities can grant great effects for battle, but also for navigating the tower itself. For example, the first one is a wind skill, which gives a damage barrier to Hugo, and an AoE attack to Unica. However, both these skills also allow the player to float in the air when using them, leading to some fun and unique puzzle platforming within the tower. So in terms of skills, you can get 3 of them: wind, then lightning, then fire. As for using skills, you can use them by either pressing the A button or by pressing the left trigger. You can also get certain gems, rubies, topazes, and emeralds, that power your fire, lightning, and wind specials respectively. Once you have at least one gem, you can actually charge the special, usually having an additional effect: longer duration, extended range, or greater damage. Now, you can't just spam specials whenever you want. You may notice a meter that changes color depending on the special you're using. This is what I call the special meter. Each special consumes a different amount of energy on the special meter, and if you don't have enough energy left in the meter, then you can't use your specials. With that being said, losing access to your specials isn't too bad, as the bar itself can recharge within a few seconds. You also get access to things that can reduce the amount of special meter each special uses, and some that can boost the recharge rate. Now, one thing about specials that I think everyone should know is that you can freely switch between them using the shoulder buttons on the controller. This may sound like something obvious, but I actually didn't learn that you could switch between specials freely in combat until midway through the final boss, when I had to look up a guide because I couldn't figure out what to do at that point, because I didn't know you could actually switch specials in the middle of combat. And just to make sure, I did look through the instruction manual, and as far as I said, it does not say anywhere that you can switch between your specials using the bumpers on the controller, like in combat. This made Hugo's route very difficult for me, personally, as I basically had to do most of the boss fights using a single special skill, which was not easy at all. Speaking of things that I only learned about right before the final boss, skill points, or SP. Now, this is on my second playthrough where I learned about this, so you can actually imagine how hard the Hugo route was for me if you've actually played this game before, because you probably know how damn difficult this game can be sometimes. So this is completely on me for not knowing about this, as the game does kind of tell you about this, and even kind of displays it to you at every checkpoint or statue, which you can save at. Basically, whenever you kill an enemy, they drop these weird purple crystal things. These are actually SP. So in the statue option, you will have 3 options: save, accept divine blessing, or nothing right now, which is just the exit menu option. What's important here is the accept divine blessing option. This opens up a menu that will actually allow you to spend your SP on all sorts of upgrades for your character. These upgrades can be incredibly useful, permanently strengthening the armor you have equipped, reducing the cooldown for your boost gauge, which we'll get to in a minute, reducing special cooldown, increasing status resist, increasing the power of the Eyes of Fact for Hugo, and even increasing movement speed. Needless to say, this feature can really change the game and can really help you give the edge in some boss fights. This is especially the case with the third path, which basically requires boost mode to actually succeed. Once again, I swear I'll talk about that in a minute. However, because I'm an idiot, I actually didn't even bother checking this option until just before the final boss of my second playthrough, in which I played as Unica. So yeah, I probably could have saved a lot of time if I had known about that. Either way, you could just say I'm too good at the game to need handicaps. The third major feature in combat is the boost gauge. Basically, you have this gauge on the side of your character portrait. Over time, it will fill up, and once it's full, if you press X, you enter boost mode, which lasts until the gauge is empty, at which point it will start to recharge. For Unica, it causes her specials to cost half as much special gauge as they normally would, and boosts their damage. And for Hugo, you get 2 more Eyes of Fact, which allows him to shoot 4 extra projectiles instead of 2, and also increases the amount of fiery balls of death he can use and the damage of his bombs. On top of this, towards the end of the game, you can get a burst ability, which, if you press X again while already in boost mode, lets you use a super ultra mega move, which can be a massive damage protection and damage dealing shield for Hugo, and an absurdly strong AoE attack that will eviscerate anything in your path for Unica. So now that we've gone over all the specifics of combat, what do you actually do in the tower? Well, the game plays like a dungeon crawler, with most of the game consisting of you climbing up the tower, killing any demons you find, and getting past various challenges on the way. There are 6 main areas in the game, each featuring their own set of puzzles, challenges, and bosses. Now, I would definitely say that the real challenge in the game comes from these bosses. With each of the 6 main areas, there is a main boss demon and typically a mid-area boss fight. While the game does vary with each path, the floors and boss fights themselves tend to stay the same, with the exception of a couple fights towards the end of the game, and the rearrangement of a few fights in the beginning of the game. The third path is a major exception to this, however, having completely different mid-level bosses, but the same general area bosses for the first 5 areas. However, even though the bosses are generally the same, it makes sense with the story, and each one provides a unique challenge for whatever path you choose, considering that each path has a different style of gameplay and different moves and mechanics that you can use. Now, speaking of challenge, did I mention how freaking hard this game is? Now, the game actually allows you to set your own difficulty, having easy, normal, hard, and nightmare difficulties. So if you're tired of dying to that stupid frickin' centipede in the flooded prison, you can just start a new file in easy and whoop its sorry ass. In all honesty, this game actually provided me with a really refreshing sense of challenge. There were some bosses that would just kick my ass. I swear, I spent a solid 1/4 of my playthrough just trying to beat that stupid Freaking Centipede, which is only a second main area boss in the game. Gonna say it now, kicking its butt with Unica on my first try was one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced in a video game. However, as many times as I died to these bosses, as many times as I got curb stomped and dunked into the Shadow Realm, I never really felt that a boss was outright impossible. Yes, when I finally got the Centipede's health down past half, and he decided to become a giant flaming tire, I will admit I had a bit of an existential crisis, but I pushed through and ended up kicking its butt. I think that alone speaks to the quality of gameplay in this game. It's a challenge, for sure, but each challenge feels like something you can overcome with enough time and patience. And when you finally do it, it feels so good. Now, the story gameplay is great, but what if I told you there was more? In addition to having 5 different difficulties and 3 main paths, there is also a speedrun mode where you can actually just speedrun the game, with the game even keeping track of splits for you. I definitely think it should not be understated how cool it is that this game has its own speedrun timer with splits, especially since this game is actually a really interesting game to speedrun. And there actually is a small but alive speedrun community for this game, which I actually may try to get into at some point. A time attack mode that tests your speed on bosses and even features an online leaderboard. All of these modes have their own online leaderboards that you can check out on the system. An arena mode that basically just puts you up against an onslaught of demons from a particular floor and has you battle multiple waves in succession. On top of that, these can all be done on all difficulties with each character. There's also a 4th character that you can get specifically for challenge modes, but I'll leave that for you guys to check out. All in all, I would say that the gameplay is really fun and entertaining. There's also a lot to do, making each path feel different from the others. However, I feel like the game doesn't really do a fantastic job of explaining these to you. So I'm going to give it a solid 7.5. Now, level design isn't something that I would normally focus on, but I think that considering that this is a dungeon crawler style game, it would be unfair not to talk about the level design. And honestly, I would say that the level design here is fantastic. Everything really felt fluid to go through. There weren't many places I got stuck or felt that I went there too early. The game does a fantastic job at getting you to go exactly where it wants you to go without even telling you where you're supposed to go at all. That being said, there are some points in the game that are basically as cryptic as finding Mew under the pickup truck next to the SS Anne. And trust me, if you played through Hugo's Path with Devil's Corridor, you know exactly what I'm talking about. However, I would call this more of a fault with actual game design than I would with level design, if that makes any sense. So with that, I would say that the level design is absolutely fantastic, and I'm giving it 9 out of 10. Now, music is something that's really important to me in a game. A good soundtrack can really help to build mood, set the theme, add emotions, or just make a game infinitely more memorable. I think some notable examples of incredible soundtracks include Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2, Pokemon Black and White, Tour of the Golden Country, all the Donkey Kong Country games, Undertale, Cuphead. So when I went into this game, I didn't really expect much. When I looked at the game online, I noticed that one of the tags was awesome soundtrack, but I didn't really think much of it. So when I actually heard it, I was blown away. Holy shit, does this game have a banging soundtrack. I actually listened to the entire thing, and there wasn't a single song that I disliked. Every single song in the game was just awesome. And even as someone who's never really been to heavy metal, I just found myself addicted to this soundtrack. None of them ever really get annoying, and I never get tired of hearing them. They also managed to make each different level of the tower have a different song that was just as good as, if not better than, the previous level. And considering how fantastic some of the tracks in this game are, that is not something that is easy to do. My verdict for this is a 10 out of 10. I know this is a very high score, but this soundtrack doesn't feature a bad song. It has me constantly thinking about multiple songs in it. It also managed to be this good despite being released in 2006. Because as far as I know, this game wasn't really remastered, it was only ported, which doesn't mean you shouldn't get it, because it's still an incredibly good game. But all I can say is that Falcom, the company that made this game, knows what they are doing with these games, and I cannot wait to hear more of their work. I've been playing through Wise 8, and holy shit, that soundtrack is fire. But yeah, they know what they are doing with music. They are just doing a great job. I can't wait to hear more of it. I really can't. Now, with all that praise, I think we should also look at the cons. I think there's only one real con that I would really change, and that is the price. Now, I didn't say this before, but when I went into Best Buy looking for this game, it was $40, and I honestly feel kind of stupid for paying that much for it. For reference, the game was released in 2006, and only cost $20 then. And you can get it on Steam for around like $10 now. So it just really doesn't make a ton of sense to buy it for $40 on Switch, even if, you know, it is very portable. And I would definitely say it's worth the $40, especially with the added portability of the Switch, because it's a very good game. I definitely say on its own it's worth $40, but I just feel like if you want to buy this game and, you know, like you're able to like sit down and play it, I'd recommend just getting it for, I just recommend getting it on Steam. Now, if you do want like a portable experience, yeah, this is definitely a game for you. This is definitely a good game that you can get that is, it's very fun. It's very good for playing portably. I'd say it fits the Switch very well. I'm looking at my Switch to the side. I just realized it's not in frame, and I feel like an idiot. But I would definitely say that this game fits the Nintendo Switch very well. I think it's a very good addition to the Nintendo Switch library, and I think that it's a really good game to take on the go. However, that being said, I considering that on that same trip to Best Buy, I got Persona 5 for $20. Persona fucking 5. A game which is critically acclaimed, probably has over 100 hours of gameplay, and was released less than half a decade ago. So I once again just don't think it makes sense for, Wise Origin to be $40 on Switch. I just don't. 30, I could see it. 20, I'd say, if you see this game for 20, buy it. If it's ever $20 on Switch, buy it. I feel like physical copies of this game are going to go up in value, as that is what has happened with past Wise games, such as Wise 8. Like, seriously, if you look up the price of Wise 8 on Nintendo Switch, it is like $200 because you cannot find it anywhere. It's a very good game, but like, holy shit, $200. And that game came out like, I think, 2018. They do kind of limited runs because the game isn't that popular in the States, which is part of the reason I'm making this video, because I feel like this game is really good, and I think a lot more people should play it, because this game is like I'd say this franchise, and this is like, it feels so weird for me to say this, considering like you guys probably know how much I like Xenoblade. You can probably see my like Pyramethro Smash video thing and just see how much I lose my shit for Xenoblade. I'd say this franchise is kinda on par with Xenoblade, which is like such a weird thing to say, but I really think it is. This game is fantastic. I love it. It's great. And I really think that like it deserves to be more popular than it is. This franchise is just so good, and like hardly anyone in the US especially even knows about it. So I'd really I really think if you're on the fence, I'd recommend trying this game, or trying one of these games in this franchise, because it's great. And if you could, it would also mean a lot if you shared this with a friend, so that, we can try and see if they're interested in it, because it's so good. It really is, and I really think it should be a lot more popular than it is. Now, with that being said, I do get the company does need money, because especially with localization, I get it, because like a lot of these, like localizing games is not easy, and it's not cheap. It is very expensive to localize a game to another country, and especially to distribute it physically. That can cost a lot of money. Especially since the Wise series was basically unavailable outside of Japan until I think very recently. And it still only has like a small audience in North America, so they really have to kind of raise the price in order to make it worth it. Now, if you're going to spend a lot of money on a Wise game, I'd recommend just buying Monstrum Nox, if you can actually find it in stores. I went in on release day, didn't even have it. I had to go in like 2 weeks later, and they had exactly one copy left in GameStop. I believe this game comes out on Switch in May, so I'd recommend actually looking out for that. And also on top of that, I know this isn't part of the Wise Origin video, but I just want to say that with this game for only $60, it comes with like an art book and like a soundtrack music disc along with the base game. That's insane. That is insane. And I will say it, they did better than Xenoblade on that, because Xenoblade still will not sell the soundtrack in America with the release. And that makes me so mad, because I love the Xenoblade soundtrack more than anything. So, my tangents aside, overall, I would just say that this game is an all-around fun and challenging experience for anyone who wants a good story, challenge, or soundtrack. The game itself also has a really interesting speedrun route that I may check out myself. I know I said that before, but I really think it is really interesting. With that being said, I feel like the price tag is a bit too high, especially considering how much it cost on its original release and how much it costs now even on Steam. But with that being said, I'd still say it's worth the money. So I'm gonna give it a solid 8 out of 10. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This was my first real review video, so I hope that it was entertaining and informative enough for you guys. I would highly recommend the Wise series to anyone out there, especially if you're into JRPGs or on the fence about them. On top of that, I said this earlier, but you don't need to play the games in any order or have any background knowledge to enjoy them. It's like Dragon Quest, where it's like, yeah, it's Dragon Quest 11 because it's another game like in the Dragon Quest series, but that doesn't mean they're really linked, if that makes sense. And the Wise games are linked, but it's like, it doesn't really matter that much to the overall story, in my opinion, at least from what I've played. With that being said, with Wise 9 Monstrum Nox, I do plan on actually streaming a blind playthrough of this at some point. I've also been recording a blind playthrough of Wise 8, which I probably should have streamed, but I didn't, so like, I mean, I'd be willing to stream that if you guys want to see that. If you guys think that would be okay if I started streaming like midway through the game or whatever, or like 20 hours into the game, I'd be willing to do that if you guys would be willing to watch it. Because I really think I'd have a lot of fun with that. I really think that would be a lot of fun to do. But if you guys want to see more JRPG content, just let me know. I love playing JRPGs. It's my favorite video game genre, and I love it. It's great. So if you guys want to see more JRPG content, or just more content in general, let me know. Let me know in the comments. I love hearing feedback, and also it really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. Because, you know, like, YouTube recommends videos like that, and that would be hugely helpful to me as a smaller creator trying to get some traction. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Play this game, subscribe, goodbye.